Hey, welcome to Film Fanatics, three film geeks discussing movies both new and old. My name is Dan.
My name is Justin.
And I'm Joe. And I'm going to be doing the intro, so it's something different. This week, the kids from The Maze Runner enter the Scorch Trials. Johnny Depp plays gangster Whitey Bulger in Black Mass. Kate Mara is in The Captive. And we'll review a World War I romance, The Testament of Youth, and an out-of-sequence Justin Long romance called Comet. We've done our least favorite Depp performances, but with Black Mass being more of a return for Depp, this week we have our top 5 Johnny Depp performances. Our Oscar A to Z film is the Fred Astaire musical The Band Wagon, and we have a milestone for the show this week. Justin has now watched over 3,000 movies since he started keeping track as a young teenager, so our old classic this week is the Bernie Mac baseball comedy, Mr. 3000. You guys know why.
Cannot wait for that. All right, well, we're going to start this week with The Maze Runner, The Scorch Trials. This is based on the second book in the Maze Runner series. The Scorch Trials sees the kids immediately after getting out of the maze and now facing the mysterious organization WCKD, or Wicked. Spoilers, they're the bad guys.
Really?
At first, they're taken in by a facility who claims to want to protect the gang from Wicked, but it is soon apparent that they are working with the evil organization, prompting the kids, led by Thomas, played by Dylan O'Brien, to escape and try their luck out in the Scorch, which is the abandoned desert with wild weather patterns and zombie-like creatures, and try to find support there. Now, admittedly, I was not a fan of the first Maze Runner, grading it a good bit lower than you guys here on the show, but Scorch Trials is not really any kind of improvement. It's just not. One of Justin's go-to comments about a film is that the director is just throwing everything out there and seeing what sticks. Sometimes I agree with this, sometimes I don't, but I'm not sure if that statement has applied to a film better this year than The Scorch Trials. It's basically a bunch of kids running around and not knowing where they're going, constantly shouting, "Go!" and "Get down" to each other. Then it's kind of a zombie movie. Then Thomas has this pointless drug trip. And then the villains make no sense.
As usual.
At one point, when a building is going to implode, they stop shooting at Thomas, saying, no, they want him alive. Yet literally, that's 12 seconds after about 30 guys were firing him to murder him. So, which is it? There's a bunch of trust between characters that make no sense. No, they can't come in here. I don't know them. Well, I do. They're cool. Oh, okay, cool. That happens about 4 different times in this movie.
Yeah, that's pretty bad security.
Essentially, the story is horrible and idiotic, is what I'm saying. There's zero character development for anybody, and at over 2 hours, it becomes a struggle. Now, I will admit, though, there are some decent performances here, and there's a few decent action sequences. Mm-hmm. I probably should watch the first Maze Runner again, because I'm giving this a D+, which is the same grade I gave that. I would say that's probably slightly better than this, because at least it made more sense. Neither one is a good film.
No.
I think a D+ is fair. I don't think it's worse than that, because visually it's okay. Mm-hmm. There's some good action. The performances were fine. I mean, nobody really was giving a bad performance. Even a lot of these kids were fine. Mm-hmm.
Except the girl.
But it's certainly not good. All right, Joe, let's go to you next.
I don't know if I can really add to that too much. Actually, it's interesting. I thought the first Maze Runner was okay. Admittedly, not a smart movie. A lot of problems, obviously. Really was. But for me, I thought the action was kind of entertaining. I thought the performances were good. And it was interesting. It was weird and didn't make any sense, but at least it held my attention. It kept me relatively interested. I can't say the same for this movie, because the most interesting things about The Maze Runner were in the first one. They had the maze with some interesting visuals. You had some really cool monsters, and you had some air of mystery as to what was going on. Here, remove all that, which were the things I liked about the first movie, which made it kind of okay. Maybe more guilty pleasure, but I thought at least it held my attention. This one, I was having a hard time staying awake. I found myself bored through most of the movie. There were a few good action sequences, but they are so stretched out from each other. Literally, you feel like you're in the Scorch, which is a dumb name for a desert. It's called the desert. I don't know why they insist on changing names for things that don't need.
Because edgy, Joe.
Is it though, man? The sad thing is, at least the first Maze Runner had personality. This one became a really generic adventure movie. And what's worse, we traded in the Grievers, which were honestly legitimately cool monsters with...
They were, actually.
Literally the most generic zombie thing ever. Mm-hmm. And it's just really disappointing. I do agree with you, though. Performances were pretty good.
Yeah.
But if there's no characterization for any of them, it almost doesn't matter.
Uh-huh.
This one barely skirts by for me. It's a D.
Oh, wow. Lower than me, even.
I wasn't entertaining.
Okay. Justin?
1 year ago, we reviewed a YA adaptation that certainly had its problems, but it held my interest with legitimate tension, a mysterious setting, and some really surprising action sequences. The sequel was zombies because topical, I guess. Endless post-apocalyptic cliches, and more sequel baiting, in a way that I can only describe as unapologetically ripping off The Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah.
Even the final action sequence doesn't even feel like an action sequence. It feels more like Anchorman-style gang fight supposed to be taken seriously with innumerous guest cameos because why not?
Exactly.
It just feels tedious, bland, and frankly rather uninteresting. I know they want to do a third one. I'll give them points for the fact that they aren't making it
Coming out in February.
February.
Maybe it's February 2017, though. I don't think
is.
it's next year.
It is.
Fast.
Yeah, that would be fast.
And I'll give them points for at least not making that a two-parter on like Hunger Games and Divergent.
How much more could they bloat it out, though? It has so little going on as it is. Really? I mean, think about
because
that
make
two-parter.
more money, Joe.
But can you imagine it, though? If they made it a two-parter, there would be nothing for those two movies. Think about how little was in this.
I know, there's nothing
There was
in this.
virtually no
There's
plot.
nothing in this.
With as much talking as there was, almost... I know less now than I did then. I kind of understood it, and I'm actually siding with the bad guys.
Wow.
I'm sorry, because they want to save humanity, and the kid's like, nah. Literally, if the villains stopped with the conspiracy and just asked some kids to volunteer, just not even to kill them, just get some samples, franchise over.
That's true.
The only reason their movies exist is because people are stupid. The villains are not evil. It's just obvious from the get-go they're incredibly stupid.
But remember, Wicked is good. Unfortunately, this movie is not. I leave it with a D+.
Well, like I said, stupid.
It is stupid.
It's incredibly dumb.
The board of directors of Wicked...
But at least the first one was fun, to some extent.
I know you didn't like the first
one made, I guess, more sense.
Well, it was a lot more
It would be
grounded
hard not to, I suppose.
Until the ending.
until the ending.
Well, the ending... It wasn't that the ending didn't make sense. The ending was just
One gigantic...
nothing but sequel
Yeah.
prepping. I mean, there's, It did make sense within the confines of the movie, I suppose, but it wasn't supposed to.
Well, I don't know. The one guy getting past everything somehow and showing up...
Yeah, that... And
Teleportation.
I did not get.
How could he have possibly gotten that?
That was great.
He was that angry.
Well, no, it didn't make any sense. And there's a lot in this one that doesn't make sense.
Not even remotely.
Alan Tudyk's whole entire plot point didn't need to be there.
It proved out to be completely pointless, right?
Oh,
More or
completely
less.
pointless, yeah.
It's good to see him, though.
Yeah, it's always good to see him, I guess, but...
Literally, though, did you guys think of
do
that?
anything.
That whole, 20 minutes was in a different movie? The
Kind
whole
of.
random,
The drug tripping scene?
trippy sequence. I just didn't even feel like it was the same movie.
Well, I didn't feel like a lot of this was the same movie. it was so disjointed that it really was trying to do everything and ended up doing nothing.
Basically. That's a good way to put it.
All right, well, up next, we'll talk about Black Mass. Joe?
Black Mass is an American crime film directed by Scott Cooper and written by Mark Mullock and Jez Butterworth, and based on the 2001 book Black Mass, the true story of the unholy alliance between the FBI and the Irish mob, which I did read before. The film stars Johnny Depp, obviously, as Whitey Bulger, Joe Edgerton as his FBI counterpart, Benedict Cumberbatch as a senator related to Whitey Bulger, Kevin Bacon, and Corey Stoll, who is in everything. The film follows the criminal career of the infamous Irish-American mobster Whitey Bulger and his relationship with the FBI, as they allow him to take over Boston's underworld in return for informing on the Italian mob. Now, I was fairly excited for this movie. I think that, as there was some buzz that Johnny Depp might actually have a good performance for the first time in a while, that kind of broke the mold from his standard kooky, Tim Burton
quirky character
where he just kind of is hyperactive and incoherent for most of the movie.
Yeah.
He's just kind of the staple he's had for the last 10 years or so. And so we actually get to see him really get into this character. He does do a pretty good job performing, and that's for certain. And it does do a pretty good job of following the basic aspects of the story. The performances from the other cast members are good. They certainly, get the right atmosphere right. They set the scene for some tension, some mystery. Unfortunately, I wish that in a film where Johnny Depp honestly does give such a good performance that they could have developed his character a little better. Because I felt like, considering as much as I know about the guy, I felt like you would come away with this thinking you don't really know him that well. Sure, he's intimidating. We know a little bit based on some events that occur. But the movie isn't really about him. It's more about the investigation and the relationship between the two men. Edgerton's character is actually the main character of the movie, which isn't bad. But it's really more his story than Bulger, which I guess kind of like the Selma discussion. It's not called King Selma, so it's similar to that. But this movie seems like it was really designed to be a character piece, and that is the main draw is him, and the focus isn't quite there. Plus, I thought that some aspects of each of the elements of the plot were a little disjointed, but for the most part, though, it was fairly coherent. It was entertaining, well acted. I'd leave it with a B+.
Okay. Yeah, well, Johnny Depp was one of my all-time favorites growing up. You got your Scissorhands, Benny and June, a lot of titles that maybe we'll hear later on in our top 5. But in the past decade, he's given us only 2 movies as a lead that I have given positive grades to. And one of them was animated.
Oh.
That was Rango.
Okay.
But finally here, he returns to his finest form, gives us possibly his greatest performance in, a decade or 2, I would say.
It's up there.
It's definitely up there, and one that may lead him to Oscar Gold, honestly. He's unrecognizable as this character, between the contacts and the makeup and the accent and everything. Mm-hmm. You just don't know that it's Depp. But the problem with the movie, and really my only one, is, you mentioned it, Joe, the characters don't really get fleshed out, including Whitey himself. There are some great performances here. Cumberbatch and Edgerton, you mentioned, no surprise there from either. But I thought just about everybody did a good job here, even the ones in smaller roles like Dakota Johnson. Mm-hmm. The only miscast for me is the full-on ginger Jesse Plemons, who dons this awful black hair dye here, does not look or sound the part at all. Mm. I don't know why they just didn't let him be him. There's obviously a lot of Irish people in Boston. Mm. I don't know why they did that. He looked, to me, completely out of place.
It was based on a real guy, so...
I guess. But the movie is just, it's too stuffed with characters. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't have had a problem if it had as long of a runtime as The Departed, let's say.
Which
obviously
is
another...
what it's based on.
Right, another Whitey Bulger, story. Because I wasn't bored for a second with this. I think they could have fleshed these characters out, given us another 20, 30 minutes. I would have been fine with that.
I'm glad you mentioned that. I actually agree. I wasn't bored. I thought they could have extended a little more time if they focused on them.
Yeah, because there's a lot going on. Mm-hmm. And it does run just a smidge over 2 hours, but either cut a couple of the stories down and let some of these other actors shine in their particular roles, or just cut them out of the movie.
Yeah.
Not everyone needs to have a character here, but it's a movie that's certainly stylized well. There's great accents, era-appropriate sets, and certainly the return of the Depp. It's an A- for me. Justin?
Thank God, no I-.
No, not here.
Well, Depp seems to only have 2 modes anymore. Going through the motions, as seen in his other gangster movie, Public Enemies, or gives an effort, but the film itself is subpar to mediocre, as is the latter with this one. I'll give Depp some credit because he captures Whitey's ruthlessness to a T, definitely going darker than dark. But with the exception of one scene, the movie never gives the audience any real reason to want to like him, rather than relish in his decades-long slaughter and corruption of society, turning it into a more or less watch a sociopath be a sociopath, which is fine if you're a person who loves American Psycho, but for me, I demand a little bit more to this character.
I do like American Psycho.
Well, there are plenty of films and TV shows where you follow despicable characters.
But at least they give you a reason to, at least at first, get behind them. Breaking Bad, the original motive of Walter White is get money to pay off hospital bills. Mm-hmm. You can relate to that. Here, Whitey is Whitey being savage and brutal. That's about it.
There's a lot more than that.
Alongside that, not really, Joe. Alongside that, the movie takes a lot of time jumps, and because of that, and the fact that it's being told by a lot of different characters that sort of get introduced about midway through the movie, I felt the length immensely.
Oh, really?
I thought it was cool hearing the different interviews.
I was okay with that, but they don't start that way. Like, the first character I would have been totally fine if they told it entirely from his perspective.
Nah,
But instead, they jump around all over
Justin,
the place.
if I may offer just a brief
Go on.
counterpoint.
You're allowed to defend yourself.
The book did that as well. I mean, it was actually based on various interviews, and they wanted to get different perspectives to show different aspects
and
of
I'm
what happened.
fine with that.
You know.
But if you're going to do that, at least be consistent straight out the gate with that. Instead, it starts off with one perspective. We follow that perspective for about 30, 40 minutes, and then we add like 5 other ones.
I like the time jumps for the most part. There are only 2 instances where I didn't think they were well handled. There is a point between 75 and like 82 where you're not sure how much time's occurring. And then, of course, there's the end of the movie where I'm not sure if it's 85, but it turns out it's 95 now.
Right.
That surprised
me.
me.
Yeah, the end jumps a lot.
The ending does jump a bit. But for the most part, I'd say within the middle of the film, I was fine with it.
For me, that felt incredibly... It almost felt like I was watching episodes, not really a full-blown movie. Outside of that, I was honestly hoping for a better movie. Depp definitely gives a solid performance, but it deserves so much more than this. I leave with a B-.
So, great performance, not a great movie. We do see that a lot.
Yeah.
I didn't
It's
feel
true.
that way, though. I thought it was a very engaging movie, but you were real bored with it.
I mean, because they kept doing that and jumping all over the place and trying to introduce new characters, and the fact that I never really felt any real compelling urge to care about where Whitey's story was going.
But I don't think he's the hero of the story. Like, I don't
not.
think we're supposed to root for him. And I think that's what Joe was saying.
Which is part of the problem.
And I get that. I do. It's just,
Well, to be
this is
fair.
marketed as Whitey's story, and you're right, it's not, which is...
Well, it's like I said, it's a classic case of Selma, not
Yes.
really quite the King's story. This is not Bulger. This is Black Mass.
Mm-hmm.
Which I agree, it's obviously meant to be more of a Depp piece, but there's a whole other story they want to tell here as well. It's a lot to do.
Which is fine, but at least give us a reason to be curious and invested in this character.
Well-
instead it's watch Depp play Dark very
Well,
well.
that's not completely fair though, because there are instances in the film where they do demonstrate like a lot of the classic gangster motifs.
And I thought those were incredibly cliche-ridden, but...
Well, it's based on real life, so there's a basis for it. But the point is, though, Justin, Bulger and his gang, the Winter Hill Gang, with the FBI's approval, basically kept things under control. Now, there were a lot of bad things, obviously, that got out of hand as the story progresses. But in the beginning, you know, like a lot of these guys do, he just wants to keep his neighborhood relatively safe, even though he's committing crimes. You know, that basic bond.
Which I was never entirely sure if I bought. But...
Well, they buy it. That's the thing you have to understand. And you know, of course, there's the scene with the old lady. I'm guessing you're mentioning.
I was going with the whole kid subplot that sort of goes nowhere, but...
Well, there's the kid subplot. There's his mother. They kind of give you some big stuff there. His relationship with his brother. I think there's more to the portrayal than just evil. Though, to be fair, Justin,
Go on.
Whitey Bulger was not a nice guy.
I'm very much aware of that, Joe.
Well, and that's my point. I mean, this movie isn't supposed to be glamorizing him. Did you not care about Edgerton's character at all?
Connolly?
Given the fact that they sort of take him out of the picture for a fairly long period of time.
He's pretty consistently in it.
In it a lot.
They more or less pull a Zodiac, where it's like, okay, we're going to introduce him, he's a big deal, then around Act 2, we sort of write him off a little bit, then he's back in the picture, and then it's over.
I didn't see Zodiac, but I think Edgerton is fairly consistently in this film.
I'd say so.
The example being, Zodiac starts off being more or less of a Robert Downey Jr. story.
Then it's Gyllenhaal.
Then it shifts to basically becoming Gyllenhaal around Act 3.
But in that film, Robert Downey basically disappears. Edgerton doesn't completely disappear from this movie.
No, but he sort of like steps to the sidelines for a little bit.
And that might be an issue with the script. It sort of tries to focus being more about Bulger and then it isn't. But that's also because his involvement became less prominent because he had less power once Stahl comes in.
That is true. Yeah, because Stoll doesn't come in till about halfway through the movie.
Mm-hmm. So that might
He's
be
one of
affected.
the introduced characters.
And even he's kind of benched to some extent.
Well,
yeah, he's not into that much.
No.
But he doesn't show up, like I said, until an hour in, so...
That's fair.
You know, Edgerton is there from the beginning, and I think fairly consistently throughout. But let me ask you guys this.
Go on.
Do you think that your perception of the film might be a little bit different if Johnny Depp hadn't been giving us garbage for 10 years, and this was being such hailed as, oh my god, Depp is here? Because you're right, it's not exactly Whitey Bulger's story. It is, but it's not only his story.
It's about 50%.
Yeah, but going into it, you think, oh, well, this is the Johnny Depp, Whitey Bulger story.
Which is what I was expecting.
Right.
Well, I haven't answered that question.
Go on.
If this were like the heyday and Depp was giving us great performances, this would be like an average performance for him. Mm-hmm. It's a good performance. Very good. But, it's if you're comparing it to all the good performances when he was at his high point, this would have been like, pretty standard good Depp performance, really. Maybe a little bit better than that. A little dark in the dark, but I think that is that big perception of, wow, it's just been so long since he's done something good. It feels so fresh, and that could affect the perception. You're right. That is hard to say. But I think the movie was pretty well done for the most part. But for me, it doesn't quite touch greatness because, to be honest, it does feel like a fairly by-the-numbers crime story.
Okay.
In all honesty. Well shot, but, I've seen this done before. And, as a lot of articles came out recently, and Justin and I feel about this, but it was kind of funny. People were commenting on, Johnny Depp does a great gangster movie, and he did a much better gangster movie years ago. It's called Donnie Brasco. So that came up again, and
I'll let you have that, Joe.
I
still haven't seen it.
I won't talk about it, but I'll say this about Donnie Brasco: it's definitely a better movie.
Okay.
But Depp's performance, pretty standard. Just plays like a guy.
Okay.
Really,
I'm glad we can at least be on that.
No, I love the movie. It's a good movie, but it's Pacino in a gangster movie.
With Johnny
Depp. And that's really what it is. The reason why this one is a better performance is because he's actually playing a straight-up villain, which he almost never does. So that's the difference here. But the movie, not quite as well done. Less focused. Johnny Brasco at least had more focus.
But, to answer your question, Dan, the critic in me would love to say it wouldn't change anything, but we just reviewed Wild Horses, where I think we can all agree Duvall is a great actor, and then came to this movie. Mm-hmm. the polar opposite. Man. So, I think it's more or less a matter of just, as you were mentioning to some extent, Joe, the change of pace, going away from these quirky Burton-y characters to, holy crap, it's a dark gangster.
It's different.
And being impressed by it. Depp is definitely a character actor, a method actor, but seeing his commitment to that is really what makes it such a memorable performance.
Well, I will say this much. Every scene he's in, though, he totally steals.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
for sure. Up next is Captive. This is a quasi-religious film based on a true crime and subsequent memoir, Unlikely Angel, by Ashley Smith. In the film, Kate Mara plays Smith, a junkie who finds herself at the mercy of Brian Nichols, played by Selma's David Oyelowo, who just escaped from a courtroom where he murdered the judge presiding over his rape case, as well as other court employees. Brian breaks into Ashley's house and holds her as a hostage. While there, Smith gets through her ordeal with a religious book given her at one of her NA meetings earlier, The Purpose-Driven Life, that she previously just dismissed, but faced with her situation, uses it to help her emotional state.
Good book.
It's a great book. It really is. Captive doesn't wear its spirituality on its sleeve like some Christian-themed films. In fact, it's sort of a minor detail in the grand scheme, and really only exists in the first place because this is a real story and this is what Smith did. Mara bounces back from her performance sleepwalking through Fantastic Four. And Oyelowo, as well as some of the supporting cast, are fine. Not that anybody's being given any real strong material, but they're all giving it their best, at least. But Captive also has trouble because of its incredibly slow pace and a finale that never even really happens. So I was just never really that invested. I give Captive a C-. All right, well, Joe did not see this one, so let's go to Justin for Captive.
So I think for this one, I'm going to start it off with my response to Dan's question a couple years back when he asked me, what would it take a religious movie to quote-unquote win with me? Number 1, actually decent storytelling. Number 2, actual actors. And 3, a lack of a need to push their agenda and just tell a decent story within those first 2 variables. I'm not going to call Captive great filmmaking, because it isn't. But what it does have going for it is believable and honest performances from the 2 leads, as well as fairly compelling storytelling. Is it perfect? No. Is it hokey at times? Definitely. But it held my interest, and I was genuinely interested in seeing how these characters were going to develop and progress. I never felt like I was watching someone shove their agenda in my face and expect me to take it hook, line, and sinker. And Mara and Oyelowo definitely seem like they're giving honest performances. Still not perfect, but in contrast to so many of these movies that we've watched, I'm okay with it. I leave with a C+.
Wow.
But, this is not really a Christian movie. It's not.
It is ish.
Ish, and that's why it won
And
with
ish
you.
is okay.
No, but see, ish is not okay.
How is ish not okay?
Because we had a big discussion about No Escape a couple weeks ago, where Pierce Brosnan gave a bunch of exposition, and you said, well, that's not really exposition. It is. It might be tiny.
What's there?
But it's there, and you fought that. So I'm sorry, this does not count as a quote-unquote Christian film. I mean, it's not even mentioned other than when she gives Kate Mara the book in the beginning scene. It's not mentioned again for like an hour.
Where are you going with the no escape thing?
Just that we were saying that there was exposition, and you
didn't
said,
think
well,
that counted
no,
because it was
that
so
doesn't
little.
count because there was so little of it. That's my only...
Okay, that's all right. I
Point.
was just legitimately trying to see the parallel.
I actually have a question.
Please.
Just because you did actually kind of like this one. Now, I've actually been thinking about it because I'm surprised I remember this movie. But in all
it's
honesty, when the game stands tall, I actually liked that movie. I honestly did, and I'm thinking
a good movie.
That technically was a Christian movie.
Yes.
That but I think the only time it was like explicitly Christian was when Caviezel was giving a little sermon at the one game. Mm-hmm. But that's technically a Christian movie. But I thought it was pretty good and not hammering the message in.
No, and I sort of liken this to that. I'm glad you made that.
Yeah, Justin graded that one pretty fairly, I think.
C plus.
Yeah, that was around C plus as well. I'd say Captain.
Oh no,
Captain, not Captain Phelps.
No,
Sorry,
Not again.
Nah.
no.
I'd say Captive is better than that, but When the Game Stands Tall is a close second in that regard.
Okay, so wait, Heaven is for real though. Now I will admit,
Here we go.
I will admit that one did push its agenda heavily, but in all other regards, I thought it was a pretty well made movie.
Well, because Heaven is for Real had a lead character who was a pastor who was questioning his own faith.
Which is interesting.
Yeah.
And so that's why it sort of, I think, stands above the rest of the pack.
That is actually more conflict than any of them.
But here, she gets this purpose-driven life, which, by the way, Purpose-Driven Life is a religious book.
But it's kind of open.
But
It's not like
quite open. It's not a necessarily Christian book.
literally people have it to like just get general advice
Sort
about
of
their day.
philosophy, not really philosophy, but
no, it's
sort of like...
Spiritualism.
Spiritualism.
Is better.
in general.
Yeah.
Okay.
So she gets this book in the beginning, then for an hour nothing happens with it, and then once she's taken hostage, after a while she remembers she has this book, and then they read it. No pun intended, but it bookends the movie. There's nothing in the middle hour about it, and that's why I can't really call this a Christian movie. You know what I mean?
No, but it's still a pivotal element of the film.
But wait, if this isn't a Christian movie, does that mean Game Stands Tall is not a Christian movie by that logic?
By that logic, I would say yes.
But I'm pretty sure you agree that's the Christian movie.
No, Game Stands Tall is a Christian movie.
But they don't really talk about it that much.
But it is sort of throughout the movie. Mm-hmm. This is a throwaway at the beginning and then at the very end.
But it holds weight in that final moment.
Yeah, it does. But, I mean, Game Stands Tall, they had religion class, they had different assignments.
Stop me any time. Didn't it take place in a Christian high school?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Which I would say is
By default?
Is by default the nature of that. But I still argue, like I said, the matter that it does play into that element, it may not be the front and center, but it is an important device that develops both their characters. I'm not saying it's the most Christian movie ever, but it's definitely a Christian movie.
Well,
hey, I'll take the C+.
I stand by my quasi-religion. Well, it's only C+, because it's not a true Christian movie, I don't think.
Okay, your argument is it's a C+ because it's not a true Christian movie.
Well, oh wait.
Well, that's what he said. He said take the C+.
But Dan, okay,
Well, the
this is
C+,
the thing, though. To make one of these, quote, Christian movies, they have to push their agenda down your throat, which is kind of negative in and of itself. Any movie that's like blatantly speaks a message.
Do you think so? I mean,
more than a narrative.
Negative.
Well, it can cripple the narrative very easily, though. I mean, most good movies don't announce their entire theme, unless you're like a Nolan movie or something. In all honesty,
look at some of the other faith-driven movies that have been released. They're not always the most explicit, but they're definitely there. Ben-Hur, The Fall.
Now, look, you always bring that up, and that's a good point. They're faith-based, That's true. But they're not funded by Christian organizations.
Well, no.
That are explicitly, basically churches that are trying to convert people.
Well, and I don't think this was either.
But my argument is, there's still Christian movies, but there's without pushing a certain agenda, just simply trying to tell a decent story and incorporating legitimate filmmaking.
Yeah,
which I can respect and get behind, instead of people with lots of money getting cameras and saying, we made a movie.
And I think that's the big problem with a lot of the Christian movies, is that the agenda is bigger than the actual movie. To the point where it's noticeable. Way too noticeable. And it suffocates the movies.
Sometimes.
Of the time, a lot of the time. I'd say most of the time. I've only seen a couple of them where I thought they were honestly good.
Well, up next is Testament of Youth. Justin?
Alicia Vikander plays Vera Britton in an adaptation of her memoir. A young woman coming of age in World War I with her brother Edward, played by Kingsman the Secret Service's Taron Egerton, indeed, and her fiancé Roland, played by Game of Thrones' Kit Harington.
Wow.
Though as the war intensifies and her loved ones head off to war, Vera puts her promising career at Oxford on hold to become a nurse and deal with love, loss, and most importantly, the need for peace in her time.
He needs to do like the descriptions of like these romance novels. That was perfect. That was really good.
This is the fourth appearance by Vikander in a movie we've reviewed on Film Fanatics. But far from me to complain, because it's only really continuing to show how talented and how promising Vikander's career as an actress honestly is. Now, Testament never really completely evades tackiness at times, and in others it's more or less a very well-acted soap opera. But even during all those semi-hokey moments, Vikander keeps one interested in seeing how it's all going to come together. When it is being honest and focusing on those deep personal moments, the movie does come to life, adding in some really well-shot sequences and a really strong commentary on the war. I'm not entirely sure if it ever leads to the biggest punch it's gunning for, but it's got a lot of things to say, and it's very easy to understand why this was based on a piece of literature that is still in print today. I think there are a couple subplots that go a little all over the place. Sometimes it drags in a couple areas. But it's still a pretty good movie. I live with a B.
Joe?
Yes, I've been pretty impressed with what I've seen of her thus far. I mean, and I think this film...
Even in Seventh Son?
I honestly forget that movie until you guys bring it up every show. But
Sorry.
I think she was good in it. I couldn't tell you. I blacked out. So, the Seventh Son of the Bridges. I couldn't find her performance over the garble. But I think here she plays a really, really well-written character. I think there's definitely a lot of conflict she has to deal with. I also think the supporting cast, and we got to see, I believe it's Jon Snow, right?
Yep,
Jon Snow and Eggsy. So we've got like the best of Britain here.
Why not?
Pretty much. And, I think that there's enough there. I do agree, though, some of the subplots definitely don't get developed as much as they should. But there still is an epic scope. There's still some good atmosphere. I thought the music was great in this movie, and it's spectacularly shot. I think there's some of the... one of the phrases we won't mention. There's definitely an abundance of it here. A certain scenery sort of thing. Definitely some set pieces.
I can't fight you on that one, Joe.
Showing off England. But it is beautiful. There's no denying it. There were some pacing issues, but it's a fairly long movie. It's got to feel a little bit. On the whole, I thought it was pretty good. I leave with a B as well.
Okay. Yeah, other than the beauty of the cinematography in this movie, Vikander makes the movie. She really is coming into her own as a solid young actress. She breathes life into this character with vulnerability, intelligence, but I can't really say the same for Kit Harington. I don't get it. Now, what is he on, Game of Thrones?
Yes.
Okay, don't watch Game of Thrones. But he has yet to give a performance I've connected with. He's pretty, I guess, but, I mean, granted, a lot of his movies so far have been putrid. Seventh Son, Pompeii, so maybe that's the culprit.
Probably.
Yeah.
But I still didn't really connect with him here either. So I'm not getting the whole Kit Harington thing. This is the closest he's come to a good performance for me, and it still kind of left me whatever. But I do like that the themes are not World War I exclusive. Mm-hmm. I think they can honestly be taken into the present day. There's a lot of really universal themes going on here between the war and the romance, both. But I thought it was pretty boring.
What about Eggsy?
Eggsy was fine as always, but she makes the movie.
She does,
absolutely.
For me, it's a B minus.
I mean, I can understand that.
Period piece, Dan.
It is a period piece, big time, but it's not at the cutoff point.
But again, I've rated far from the Madden crowd higher than you guys. I rated Belle higher than you.
True.
I mean, that's not a kiss of death. It has to be interesting is the problem.
That's fair.
And this wasn't.
I mean, I thought it was pretty by the numbers, but like I said, her performance was great, and you do feel the scope. I think you do. Definitely.
absolutely.
So, I mean, it still feels kind of
There's
epic.
good stakes. There's, good romance aspects.
You thought it was just kind of past that?
But it was, well, I mean, you said it. It runs on a bit long. It's got pacing issues. I thought it was incredibly boring.
I mean, my bias might be, I thought the romance was okay, but I'm more interested in the war stuff. I will confess. And World War One is a very interesting movie. We don't get many great movies about it.
No,
and
really don't.
Even though
War Horse is another one, by the way.
Yes. And so, I mean, that might have been a bit of it for me, but I gave it kind of a pass because that isn't really the main focus of the movie.
No, it's true. It's not.
So, I mean, I thought it functioned well, but it's definitely not as ambitious as I think it wants to be. I think you mentioned that, Justin.
No, I mean, it's not quite getting at the biggest emotional impact that it wants, but it's definitely apparent the personal touch on this one. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what really brings this movie together.
But it does come off as pretty soapy at times.
Oh, that was one of my big issues with it.
Like you said.
Yeah.
It does, but this is also a coming-of-age story, so, I mean, some of the soapiness I can kind of understand. And
There's a ton of coming-of-age stories that aren't soapy.
with World War One as a backdrop.
I don't know how many romance movies there are set in World War One, Justin. You got me there. I don't think that excuses it.
I don't think war is that soapy.
Yeah.
Usually it's pretty serious.
It kind of can be. I mean,
well, you're right.
I'm not going to say the gold standard is Pearl Harbor here, but...
Well, yes, you're right. The romance aspects can get kind of soapy, but that's kind of also a staple of classic cinema. Think about all the movies that basically were guy goes off and, I'm not sure if that stands still today, but that's just sort of an accepted trope. But it doesn't necessarily mean that they're all soapy. Mm-hmm. There are plenty that aren't,
All right, our home media moment is Comet, and Joe's going to tell us about that.
Yeah. Comet is a 2014 comedy drama, dramedy, directed and written by Sam Ismail. The film stars Emmy Rossum of Dragon Ball Evolution and Justin Long of Galaxy Quest. I'm sorry, Emmy. You're fine, but I can never forget.
Joe, please watch Shameless.
Oh, she's on Shameless?
Yeah.
After a meeting by chance during a meteor shower, pessimist Dell and insightful Kimberly begin a 6-year journey through a relationship that blooms and fades over time. The movie is shown through glimpses of parallel universes and flashbacks that are not necessarily in chronological order. They are definitely not, showing the viewer the progression and depression of their intricate relationship. I think that this is kind of an example of the indie movie like Curse, I guess. There's definitely some of that there. I do like the out-of-sequence story to an extent, and I do think that there is some good dialogue here. There's definitely some bite to it. I think that Long and Rossum do have some good chemistry. I do think there's that. They're both, giving some pretty good performances. The problem is that you kind of stop caring pretty soon because Long plays kind of a despicable character, and Rossum's not much better, and most of it's just kind of them bickering, in a very mean-spirited way, which I guess is kind of realistic, but it's not the most compelling to really have me attached to these characters. So while I thought that it was an interesting story to tell, the way it was shot, and it does have some actually appropriate scenes, I thought it had some excellent moments of direction here and there. On the whole, pretty mixed bag. I leave it with a C.
Well, I will give Comet points for trying something very atypical of a rom-com. But unfortunately, the execution is a little frantic, and Comet sort of gets swallowed up in its own conceit. Now, the characters and dialogue, like you said, Joe, are pretty realistic. And I agree that they do have good chemistry, the actor and actress here. But maybe because the dialogue is so realistic, it's not all that engaging. Mm-hmm. Like you sort of hit upon it. It is a lot of them sort of bickering back and forth and deciding what they want to do with their relationship. But that is also sort of why the film may connect, because it's not going for huge laughs or ridiculous premises within their relationship. It's going for realistic conversation and heartbreak, and just sort of takes a left turn with how it's presented. I can't say it always works, but I applaud the effort, and I did like the performances, so I leave Comet with a B. Justin?
Wow.
There's little worse than a movie going out of its way to justify how smart it thinks it is.
Oh, no.
Now, here's the thing. This is a movie that I really did love the idea of this. Mm-hmm. And at the start, I was expecting, this could be like an A- or an A. And it actually is really smart. But Long's irritating and somewhat evil main character, constantly trying to provide exposition disguised as character development, or not, depending on how one views the narrative, it pulls down the film tremendously. I'll admit they have chemistry, and I'll admit I was never really bored. The running time is beautifully paced. I actually found myself more intrigued just piecing together the overall narrative as it went along. I thought Rossum did a better job than Long in this one. I feel like Long was just trying to play too much of the cynic, and
You typically don't like him, though, to be fair.
he's made like 6 movies. I'm not sure how fair that statement
made
is.
more than
I've
that.
seen at least a dozen, so I don't know what movies you're
And
watching.
to be honest, Justin Long doesn't really play anyone besides Justin Long.
Oh, that is true.
Well, I'll give you that, but
This is a meaner.
that's
Justin
my
Long.
point, I guess. If you don't really like the quote-unquote Justin Long character, of course.
It's not so much that I don't like him, it's just a matter that he plays the same character in every movie, so it's hard to say, like, whether or not that speaks to his acting, you be the judge. But,
Well, hey, if you're good at playing one role, man, that's something.
but I mean, overall, I thought this was a great idea that was just a little bit miscast, a little bit frantic, and could have been really, really something special, but just is good instead of great. I leave Comet with a B as well.
Moving on.
It just sounded like you
No.
agreed a lot more with your grade than mine on that.
That's what I was thinking. That's like a C.
Well, like I
C+.
said, which is why I wanted to introduce that point. When this was kicking off, I'd say like the first 5-10 minutes, I was expecting like A-A.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, throughout the movie, I was not bored. I was definitely into what it was doing and where it was heading. It was just Long's performance is kind of all over the place. He has chemistry with Rossum, but it doesn't quite save his annoying, cynical character, which just gets more cynical as it goes along. And because of the fact that his character development is more or less trying to explain the nature of the movie when we don't need explanation, it really does ruin the promise this movie had.
I'll say, though, upon listening to your reviews, you're right. The realism does help you connect a little bit. I'll bump it up to a C+.
Ooh.
Maybe I was a little too harsh on the... I didn't like the characters that much, but maybe that's kind of the point. So, they were...
Yeah, I don't think Justin Long's character is meant to be like
that was my biggest thing, but you are right. I mean, it does strike.
I think it's relatable.
It's relatable. Just you're right. It's very smart, and I liked that.
Mm-hmm.
But I did think there was a little bit of pomposity in the script,
A little
which
bit.
is a little annoying.
A little bit. But I don't know. I think Justin Long being a Justin Long-y type character
It's pretty much always it.
is, a bit snarky and I don't know.
You know what though, Justin?
Which is fine, but find someone better to handle that than Justin Long.
In all honesty, he was different in Galaxy Quest.
He was different in Zack and Mary Make a Porno as well. All right, well, interesting premise. Went a little off the rails, I guess.
I think so.
All right, up next we have our top 5 Johnny Depp performances, and I'll start this one, and I'm going to start with an honorable mention. This one tears me up inside because it's Captain Jack Sparrow.
Okay.
What I hate about Captain Jack Sparrow is that he lent himself to the next decade of Depp performances.
This is true.
Without Sparrow, you don't have, Barnabas Collins, and you don't have Mordecai, and all of these, the Rum Diary guy. What's it? Thompson, Hunter S. Thompson.
And Lone Ranger.
Lone Ranger. You don't have Tonto, yeah.
Tonto.
But if he just made the first Pirates of the Caribbean movie
And stop.
and then did other things, this would be a great performance. So I leave it as my honorable mention because it tears me up to say it, because what came after was horrible, but the performance itself, at least in the first one, is good. My number 5 is Rue from Chocolat. I love this movie.
I've seen that in such a long time.
Yeah, it's been a while, but it's maybe his best of the dramatic performances I've seen. Now, there have been a handful that I haven't seen that maybe he does a better job in, but, the romance part, the drama part, he really did this very well, I think, here. It hadn't for a while. I guess Benny and June, you could say, was kind of dramatic, but also comedic.
It's more drama.
More drama,
Light drama.
And certainly some romance in there.
Yeah.
But I thought his chemistry with Juliette Binoche was very good here. Just a very solid romance. Number 4 for me is The Mad Hatter in Alice in Wonderland. Now, this was the only post-Sparrow weirdo performance that I liked. I mentioned during Black Mass that he's been in 2 movies that I gave a positive grade to as a lead since the last decade. And one was Alice in Wonderland, the other one was Rango, like I said. Oh. But I thought the Mad Hatter was fun. It's a fun character, and Depp got to do his weird Depp thing and have it make sense within the confines of the story. Number 3 is J.M. Barrie from Finding Neverland. This is a really underrated movie that I would say has been perditioned.
Absolutely.
Nobody talks about this movie anymore.
0.
Yet it got nominated for a ton of awards, including Best Picture.
Wow.
And I believe he got nominated for Best Actor as well. I thought this was a really, really great, subtle performance. This is probably the last of the subtle performances, because this was the year before Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. But this is a really, really good performance in a really good movie. Number 2 is Whitey Bulger from Black Mass. As we talked about, I'm not sure if this would be such a revolutionary performance if the last decade wasn't so terrible for Depp.
I think it's because he shaved his head.
But he shaved his head, the makeup is great, the contacts, the accent. I think he really, really embodies this completely other character, which is something Depp used to do in all of his movies.
True.
And, lately it's just been Depp being Depp. Joe, let's go to you next.
It's very, very well stated. There are 2 modes. It's a little different than Justin said, though. It's, well, okay, I guess there are 4 modes, technically. There's good and bad, like anybody. But really, there's Depp doing the Depp thing, which is the quirky Burton thing, which he's associated with, and then him just becoming other people. Which is why, if you look early in his career, there's a lot of good performances, and so the list was not as easy as you might think. For me, I guess I'll give an honorable mention. Rango from Rango. I mean, really, I did not think I was going to like this movie for some reason. I don't know why.
It's cute.
But it really wasn't bad, and I thought he did a really good job in it. So, yeah, it was enjoyable. Number 5 was Spencer Armacost in The Astronaut's Wife, because this is the first time I ever discovered Depp. This is the first time I ever discovered Depp playing somebody so exceedingly evil that it was scary. Usually I'm not really scared of Johnny Depp, but this is the first time ever was him playing this villainous character. Just a lot of tension there, mostly from him. The movie's kind of like okay. It's kind of like a weird like sci-fi thriller, but he does do a really good job, and it's something different than you would have seen. Number 4 is Captain Jack Sparrow. I do agree with your point, but I still can't deny that he does such a good job with the character. It's really fun. I do really like the first Pirates movie. The rest, not really, but, I can't deny this one was awesome, and mostly because of him. Number 3 is James Whitey Bulger from Black Mass. This is a really good performance. Kind of hid that it wasn't. Not to spoil myself, but no, really, he does do an excellent job. And even though Donnie Brasco, maybe one of my favorite movies of his, like I said, performance-wise, this is the mobster movie for Depp, for sure. Just really becomes this guy, and once again, really evil. Very different. Number 2 might make Dan happy. Probably happier than my number 1 will. And number 2 is Edward Scissorhands. Because, I think the thing that impressed me the most about this, though, is it's the only performance that I can think of where he portrays a character with very little dialogue. It's mostly his motions, and combining that with the makeup, it's just a haunting character, and truly iconic, there's no denying. So,
Yeah.
if I had to pick one of the Burton ones, I'm like, I think that's a
good choice.
Pretty good choice.
Yeah. Justin?
Well, if you'll allow me, gentlemen, I'd like to have 2 honorable mentions.
2? Oh, man.
The first goes to Glenn Lance from A Nightmare on Elm Street. I think it was a great down-to-earth character.
Yeah.
It's one of the few times that we have the loving boyfriend who's actually kind of smart for a change, instead of, oh, I'll protect you because I can. Which I really did like. I thought that was a nice change of pace from standard horror cliche.
You have to watch more Buffy.
I won't deny the validity of that statement. But, and my number 2, Dan, I think you'll be happy about this, J.M. Barrie, Finding Neverland. You're absolutely right. It is a completely glaringly perditioned movie.
It really is.
It honestly makes me sad because that was fantastic. My number 5, William Blake, Dead Man.
I thought about it.
I wanted to put this one on the list because I feel like there's no real Johnny Depp performance I can honestly compare it to. It's different and it's strange, but somehow it fits perfectly with the kind of story being told here, and I love it for that. Depp fuses himself perfectly to the character, making himself vulnerable, but also transforming as the story goes along. I really think it's one of the most unique westerns for that.
Yeah, too bad it just didn't end.
Never did it end. I'm still watching it.
Debatable, gentlemen, debatable. But number 4, Rochester the Libertine. This is a movie has reviews that are from it's good, not great, to it's horrible. But I like this one because it's Depp playing a character that's not likable, but is aware that he's not likable and is challenging both the viewer and the audience that he's playing to at that time to respect and understand that, to see how it develops. And I feel like he really does commit to that character and sort of beg the question of what does it truly mean to put on a good performance, and challenge the censors for their time. My number 3, Sweeney Todd, the Demon Barber of Fleet Street.
Good choice.
It was definitely a different flavor from the stage musical, but he committed to this role and then some. At the time this came out, I had many a friend that were big fans of musical theater. They were completely blown away from his performance in this, and I frankly agree with them. I think it was a superb performance. He absolutely nailed the music. That's very different from other musicals in that regarding tempo and rhythm. And I mean, commits to the complete dark humor, goriness of it with a passion, which I thought was fantastic.
I was like Rickman in that as well.
Rickman's good too.
I should say it's one of the few in the last decade I have not seen. I do hear that he does a good job, and it's not your average Jack Sparrow ripoff
it really
performance. So I'll give you that.
No, I'll admit I think that's a good choice. Had I remembered it, I may have considered it on the list. But the thing is, to be fair, I saw it once and I thought it. Well, okay, twice. I thought it was good, but I wasn't as blown away by it. Once again, classical, best movie ever. Well, gotta judge it by that standard.
Right.
Can't possibly reach it, But you were right. Great music and a great Depp performance for sure.
And my number 2, Sam, Benny, and June. Now, this is one that you can kind of dismiss, sort of, because he doesn't have a whole lot of lines in this, but it's kind of for the same reason that you put Edward Scissorhands on your list. Mm-hmm. He manages to be a likable character, a really interesting character, and also have this sort of own quirk with him without overpowering it and heading into Burton territory. He manages to have this homage to silent film, such as Buster Keaton, Charlie Chaplin, and yet really feels like his own entity, which I really liked, and I feel like he almost steals the show at several moments in the movie. I think it's an incredibly underrated performance from Depp.
Yeah, he's the most memorable part of the movie.
Yeah, I was just saying, I honestly don't remember most of the cast. Who's the girl in that?
Mary Stuart Masterson.
I believe that's correct.
And then Aidan Quinn is the dude.
Oh, well, I know who he is.
Yeah. I mean, people went to see that movie for Depp anyway.
That was at the height of his, when he was still on, 21 Jump Street,
early 90s, for sure. Yeah. Speaking of 21 Jump Street, I will say that, my statement earlier that I've only given positive grades to 2 of his leading performances. His guest starring role in 21 Jump Street's fantastic, and he was great in Into the Woods, too, but he's only in one scene.
Did you like him in Tusk as well?
No, I did. Well, yeah, I did like him in Tusk, but I didn't give that movie a positive grade. So
the fact that he's getting a spin-off.
He was actually one of the better parts of Tusk.
I know you like that.
To be completely honest, but as you guys probably figured, my number 1 is Edward Scissorhands.
I called that.
I mean, why would you not? It used to be in my top 25 of all time.
It's not anymore.
No, I think the only Burton that is now is Beetlejuice.
Oh, okay.
What a movie!
Great one. I need to watch it.
Yeah,
a long time.
That's very good.
Sequel?
But Edward Scissorhands is just fantastic on so many different levels. His character is sensitive and nice, obviously vulnerable, not sure, where he belongs in the world. I mean, it's such a sad character.
It's a pretty depressing movie, actually.
It's a very depressing movie, and he plays the hell out of it. And what a great Anthony Michael Hall performance as well, as the jerky boyfriend. But this is the one that made me fall in love with Winona Ryder as well. I was big into her for a long, long time after this.
As many were.
Joe?
If we're talking performances, the standout for me...
I'm very intrigued by this, because I don't like the movie.
Oh, you've never seen it.
Oh, okay.
But Raoul Duke, a.k.a. Hunter as Thompson in Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. Which I know you have not seen, but you've seen...
No, but I've seen him do the same character in Rum Diaries.
True. But I'll tell you, though, it's a pretty good movie. Maybe a little overrated, but I can't deny being familiar with Hunter S. Thompson and the fact that Depp was friends with him. he never has transformed into another person before to this degree. It's undeniable.
Okay.
You know, I mean, the book is kind of parallel though. This movie embodies a lot of the craziness and ridiculousness. Hunter S. Thompson's a very acquired taste. I'm
not a fan.
Definitely a true statement, Joe.
Definitely. I can't say I'm like the biggest fan, but you know, I can see both sides of it. But there's no denying how good his performance is, especially if you've like seen interviews with Tom. Like it's crazy.
Cool.
It is. So you know,
Justin?
It's Ed Wood.
well, I saw that coming too.
Yeah, that was about as obvious as Scissorhands over here.
Yeah.
I feel like this was a pretty straightforward number one, but
Yeah, I thought so.
I'll cut it short because I've talked to death about Ed Wood. I think it's a great story about a man who more or less drove himself to insanity trying to make a good movie and had a lasting legacy for very different reasons. But he adds such humanity and intrigue with it, while also adding a unique side element in terms of looking at his own identity and how he relates that in the most hilarious ways with his significant others. I think it's a brave performance that invests in terms of talking about the creative psyche and also trying to stay true to oneself without compromising.
Classic.
I thought about it, but I haven't seen that movie in almost 20 years, so
long time.
I didn't feel quite right about putting it on, but I do remember that being a great performance.
Well, I know your guys were really obvious. Did you think mine was going to be Donnie Brasco?
I actually considered it, yeah.
Because I'll be honest, until
I
I made
actually
the
thought
list,
yours might have been Whitey Bulger.
he was up there.
Yeah, it was number 3.
Yeah, but
for you.
no, yeah.
All right, well, up next is our old classic, and this is a special one for Justin here. So, Justin, let's hear about Mr. 3000. Usually an old classic, we pick our own movie.
But no, this time
But this one sort of
gets to
got
experience
bestowed upon Justin.
to be his
one
old
could
classic
say.
that he missed.
Mr. 3000 is not my name, but rather focusing on the late, great Bernie Mac playing Stan Ross, otherwise known as Mr. 3000, so named for his legacy years ago when he finally, supposedly, succeeded in 3,000 hits. Now as an entrepreneur with an ego, largely because of his title, Ross learns that a clerical error has disproven his record and heads back to the field to earn his title, despite now being 50. Well, going back to what Joe mentioned at the start of the show, we're celebrating a little bit of a Film Fanatics milestone. So why Mr. 3000? Well, since I was about 14, I've been compiling a master list of more or less every single movie I've come across and reviewed to some extent. Well, the review is pretty self-explanatory. It's a dumber than dumb movie, but what makes this movie bearable and far beyond much lower grades is Mac's commitment to the overall stupidity. The joke's effectiveness, I'd say, is somewhere between 40 to 60 at best and 30 to 70 at worst, but it's fun. And honestly, there are some entertaining moments and a couple decent gags that keep it away from the D+D range that it could have easily fallen into it in other hands besides the likes of Bernie Mac. I leave Mr. 3000 with a C.
Yeah, it's definitely a pretty standard, inoffensive fluff comedy, but Mac is the reason it works. It's really a shame that his life was cut short because he had a very likable quality to him.
Absolutely.
And as all accounts go, was just a really nice guy in the real world. I could have easily seen him having a post-sitcom film career playing in these sort of dopey-ish kind of comedies. But to that end, I like that he played against type here. He's a real jerk, certainly in the beginning. But the movie, takes a standard arc and is fairly basic. But there's definitely a few laughs, and Mac bumps it much higher than if it were, Justin mentioned certain other people. I had a couple specifics in mind, Adam Sandler and Will Ferrell. I think he, knocks it out of the park much more than either of those guys would have done.
No pun intended.
And I was going to say, yeah, I didn't mean to make that baseball reference,
puns
but
tonight.
There it is. I leave Mr. 3000 with a B-. Joe?
Coming at the end once again. Not much to really add. I will say, though, since we're sharing Bernie Mac, it's kind of funny back in high school. I mean, I liked Bernie Mac as a kid. I liked watching the Bernie Mac show. But somehow he died, and I guess a couple years went by, and I did not realize it. Asked somebody about it, they told me, and I still can't believe it, because I somehow missed that one. Mm-hmm. So it really was a shame that his life was cut so short. I mean, just such a likable guy, like you guys said. Mr. 3000, it's such like a basic sports, like, character growth coming down from a peg and learned to be a better person. You know, it's so run-of-the-mill.
Very standard.
But, you know, I think it's relatively funny. And, Mac just carries the film for the most part. I pretty much agree with you, Dan. I leave it with a B-. It's decent, but mostly just because of him.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite dippy, really. I mean, there's nothing to it. It's fluffy, it's amusing.
I mean, it has a good message, but it's light, no real chances, nothing particularly risky,
right.
Stylistically interesting. It's, pretty basic.
Angela Bassett plays the girlfriend / reporter. She could have been anybody. I mean,
anyone.
She's fine in it, but she doesn't really...
Nothing.
Doesn't really bring
she doesn't
anything.
add that much to the table here. But...
Sorvino.
Yeah, Paul Sorvino was pretty good. Chris Noth was all right.
Yeah.
There's a few good performances, but...
Dane Cook.
Yeah, Dane Cook plays the mascot, which I had to look up because I recognized the voice, but none of us could place him. But yeah, early Dane Cook there. He's only in a couple of scenes, but...
Little things.
It's one of those movies where it's like... It's a feel-good movie.
Yeah.
It's
light and
stupid,
fluffy.
but it's innocent enough.
Yeah.
I don't typically like those.
No.
Hence,
but you like Bernie Mac.
Yes.
But then you see like a blended, and it's like, well...
Blended was actually okay though.
Yeah, it was.
It was okay.
Well, I wasn't gonna go I wasn't gonna say Zohan.
No. Well, but then again, Terry Crews was half the reason.
That's true. Terry Crews. Now, see,
Yes.
if they remade Mr. 3000, they could do it with Terry Crews
but
now.
I could kind of believe that. Also, a former athlete. He's still got
That's
the
true.
body. He could probably pull it off.
Yeah, that's very true, actually. Yeah. Or The Rock.
Rock could be
Another
good.
likable person.
A lot of people actually could do it. We said Kevin Hart. We mentioned would be possible.
I think Kevin Hart could remake.
If you
this
do a
movie
Mr. 3000 remake like 10 years down the line.
Yeah,
maybe
I could see it.
Maybe,
especially because he plays that larger than life jerk pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
For Bernie, this was against type. For Kevin Hart, that's pretty much the start of every movie he's in.
More or less,
you know? And then sometimes he changes, sometimes he doesn't. All right, well, Justin, good job on your 3000 there.
Yep.
Thank you,
Mr. 3000.
You are officially
as
designated
they
with the
call
title.
you.
Yep.
Until he realizes in 2 months he only saw 29.97.
No, 3 of them were invalid.
And then we have to start again. All right, well, finally we have the Band Wagon. That is our Oscar A to Z film. And this is a 1953 movie with 3 nominations to its name: Costume Design, Best Score, and Best Screenplay.
No surprises here.
Yeah, I mean, all of what you would expect it to be nominated for. Musical stage and screen star Tony Hunter, played by Fred Astaire, is worried about his declining career, and his good friends have written a stage show for him as a comeback. Tony signs on to it, even though he isn't thrilled with the chosen director, played by Jack Buchanan, changing the script from a light comedy to a dark fantasy drama. Tony also has insecurities with his female co-star Gabrielle Gerard, played by Sid Charisse, before realizing that she is insecure as well about being in his presence, and the two fall in love, though she's already dating the show's choreographer to add some tension. Based on a 1931 Broadway show in which Astaire also starred, The Band Wagon is one of the classic MGM musicals and is regarded by many as one of the finest that the studio had to offer, right behind Singin' in the Rain.
Wow.
It's in the National Film Registry, it's ranked in the top 20 on AFI's Best Musicals, and it is easy to see why. I don't think it's nearly as charming as Singin' in the Rain, though the melody of the lead song is very reminiscent of the showstopper Make 'Em Laugh from Singin' in the Rain. It had kind of the same melody. But there's truly some great songs here. The costumes are great. The performances really pop. The story is pretty basic, though. And I can't say every song is a knockout, but it's definitely one of the more memorable musicals we've had so far in the A to Z. We've seen quite a lot so far. This, for me, was on the higher end of the scale. I leave The Band Wagon with an A-. Joe?
I pretty much agree.
Oh, good.
Fred Astaire, awesome, as always.
Yeah.
What can you say? It almost goes without saying, really, great dancing here, great choreography. And, of course, for me, I love the costumes, especially with these older films. Technicolor?
I believe it was Technicolor.
Yeah, I thought so. It really popped for me. I liked the kind of shifting of the storyline, so they kind of mixed that in. I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
You don't really get to see too many musicals that have a sort of a spin on noir murder.
That was crazy.
Yeah, it's got a couple interesting twists to it.
That was kind of unique. But you're right. The main story, it's pretty basic. I didn't think it was the best musical I've ever seen. Obviously, there are some. I think Singin' in the Rain is far superior to this.
Oh, yeah.
But, for the most part, it was entertaining. It was enjoyable. I liked the twist there for certain. Performances were decent. decent chemistry with the leads, I'd say.
Yeah.
But for the most part, what you'd expect with some interesting elements to kind of separate it, like you say, to make it a little more memorable. I leave it with a B+.
Okay.
A little below A.
Justin?
I hate to be the one to admit this, but this is my first experience watching a Fred Astaire movie.
Oh.
And all I could find myself saying well after it is, wow, I wish I had seen his stuff earlier. The musical tends to get lost in itself around the third act, with it introducing a plot device that, while watching it, Dan and I both kind of called shenanigans on.
That happens with a lot of these movies, though.
But what I feel like this movie does well, and I think it's kind of a sign of a great musical, is its whimsy draws you in to the point that you don't even really care once it gets introduced. Like, the whole noirish thing was so bonkers, out of left field, and unique. I didn't even care that it was that random, and I was legitimately interested in seeing how that played out and where it was heading. It was gimmicky, but it was just the right kind of gimmicky to make it interesting. The storyline's not always perfect, and I'll admit, sometimes, as the case with a lot of these musicals earlier on, I feel like some of them focus more on the spectacle rather than the storyline. But, I mean, it's hard to fight Astaire's charisma. He absolutely is a triple threat. And, I mean, it's a really solid musical despite any of the flaws. I leave with a B+.
Well, and, you know, this was not early on in musical movies. I mean, this is in the 50s. I think by then they had sort of figured out how to
Split the difference
a little bit. I mean, some of those earlier ones we saw, like Alexander's Ragtime Band.
That's the one that comes to mind. That's the one that's like, that's almost all dancing.
It's almost
and
all
singing and like,
dancing and almost no plot. I think here, that by this point they've found, and Singing in the Rain was in this era as well. They've sort of found that balance, I think, a little bit better.
They've got enough time to get used to the talkies.
Yeah, basically. Yeah, used to the singies, as I call them.
Back then, yeah.
Yeah, back then. But, the lasting legacy of this movie, which I didn't realize until we were watching it, but Michael Jackson must have been a huge fan of this movie, because both the Billie Jean video and the Smooth Criminal video are basically taken from scenes in this film, which I never realized before.
I could see it.
But I don't know if you've ever seen Smooth Criminal, but it's like a crime, like noir-ish kind of thing.
No, he's trying to avoid the cops.
Yeah, like
exactly.
And all kinds of weird stuff happens that seems kind of random. Like there's like weird like monsters and stuff
Right.
pop out of nowhere. Yeah.
Which as we were watching it, I was like, wow, that's quite familiar. And I looked it up, and apparently, he was definitely cribbing from this movie. So. Obviously a lasting legacy.
Yeah,
absolutely.
For a movie I'd never even heard of.
So you can all jump on the bandwagon.
Everybody's on the bandwagon, yeah.
Yeah.
This was, I think, maybe my first full-length Astaire. My parents are big fans, so I know it's, I've seen bits and pieces here and there. I don't know if I've seen all of Top Hat or not. That's one that used to run in my house a lot.
Roll a couple titles. I had to have seen him somewhere.
Top Hat's the one I know the best.
Because I can't. I feel like I've seen a Fred Astaire movie in the past, but I couldn't tell you offhand. Maybe this is my first
Astaire
one.
and Rogers was the combo.
The duo.
The main combo.
Okay.
Right. So maybe you've seen one. I've seen a half or maybe one a long time ago. Justin's never seen any. So
yeah,
we're all pretty new to the Astaire train here.
Yeah.
Definitely.
But I'm sold. I mean, he does a great job here. And I think it's interesting, though, that he's playing the same character that he played on Broadway 20-plus years earlier.
I guess he must have really stuck with it then.
I guess. I mean, he must have really connected with that character. Because you don't see that too often.
Yeah, the fact that it was that much older.
Albert Nobbs is the only thing I can think of. Like, Glenn Close was in that in the 80s, and then she did the movie in the early 2010s.
Well,
and found a way to adjust it to his age.
You got to be in shape.
He said his age. I don't know if he meant Albert Nobbs or not.
With a stare. With a stare. Not close.
Because his is a Nobbs.
Look, I'm sorry,
Man.
but the most memorable thing about that movie were the knobs.
Yeah. Janet McTeer's knobs were far and away the best of that movie.
I'll never forget them.
I would say. All right, well, that is going to wrap it up for this week. We've got Boldly Going on Joe's channel currently running. We've got a few episodes up for that, going through all of the different Star Treks. And you just hit 1,500 subs.
Yeah, I'm on my.
Congrats on that.
I'm on my way to 1,600 almost.
That's awesome.
Lately, I've been
Nice.
growing. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm trying to. Literally, I've got too much now. People are saying you got to read this, you got to watch that. Look, I don't.
You're only one person.
I don't have the time.
Right.
So, but yeah, Planet of the Apes. I'll probably cycle through it like everything else. I'll I need to actually read the novel because I never have. So
Okay.
that'll be something too.
Very cool. And we're up to almost 100 subs on our site, which is not bad. We're
Not bad.
just starting out here. So if you have not subscribed to us yet, go ahead and do that. You can also join the Facebook group, Film Fanatics with an exclamation point, and the Twitter feed at Film Fanatics Pod. That's going to do it for this week's show. Thanks so much for listening. Bye.